Hello everyone, this is Steve from Codename One. Today we're going to learn how to convert a Photoshop file with a beautiful design into a native mobile app. Let's get started. Let's start out by talking a bit about the process of how to make an app beautiful. There's a few different ways you can go. The first thing you can do is you can use a built-in theme. Codename One has a number of really good looking built-in themes. You can use native themes so that your app just looks the same as the native platform. All the widgets on iOS, it'll look like iOS. On Android, it'll look like Android. You could use a third-party theme that another developer has developed, or you can create your own custom theme. And a lot of times when you're developing components, this is the only way to go, because you see a component that you like exactly and you need to put that into your app. So the process for building a custom theme is first of all, you find a Photoshop file or a .psd file that has the design that you need. And you can either find them on the internet, there's tons of them out there for either free or commercially, you can pay money. You can hire a designer to build it for you. Once you have that, you then go ahead and replicate the layout using Codename One components and layout managers. So you'll see the rough layout of what a theme is supposed to look like, and you create that component in Codename One, forgetting about things like colors and images and padding and stuff. You just want the layout more or less. And finally, once you got the layout, you style the components to match the design. That's where colors come in, and fonts, and padding, and margins, and images, and borders, and whatnot. And by the time that's done, your component should look pretty much like the design that you started with in Photoshop. Finding a design, as I mentioned before, is not that hard. I usually just do a Google search for mobile app design PSD, and there's lots of fabulous designs out there that that'll come up on various sites. This site is the first one that came up, and it gives you a few designs to choose from. And for our design today, I chose the iPhone 6 UI, this one right here. In particular, this screen right here, a sign-up form. So we'll look at that more in a moment. So for replicating the layout, we talked about this already. So for this form, I want to figure out exactly how that translates into layout managers, because you can't just use pixel perfect positioning. I can't say I want this text field to be at a particular pixel on the screen, because different devices are going to have different layouts. Is it going to be in landscape mode or portrait mode? Is it going to be a high density device or a low density device? Is it going to be a tablet or a phone? So you need to use layout managers in Codename One to lay out how things are positioned. And there's a set of layouts that allow you to replicate pretty much any type of design you need. So the way I'm going to splice this one up is, if we look at the design, the top title bar, we don't have to worry about that. We inherit that from form. We just need to style it. The remainder, we're going to use a border layout on the form that allows me to set up this button in the north panel of the border layout, this button in the south panel, and all the fields in the center panel. Then this center panel is going to have a nested box layout with a y-axis. That's going to be scrollable and allows me to lay out the rows vertically down the component. Some of the rows, like this first row, I'm going to have another nested component of a grid layout so that I can have the two fields on one row. The grid layout will ensure that the first name and last name fields have the same width and same height. This other one, it's got a label and a text field, and because they're not the same size, I can't use a grid layout, so I'm going to use a nested border layout with the +1 label in the west panel and the phone number in the center panel, and that'll stretch out. So my first attempt, when I first create the layout, it should look something like this. It's not going to look anything like the finished product. You can look at this. Here's what I want it to end up like, and here's what I'm going to start with. But the fundamental layout is the same. This button is in the top. These fields are laid out vertically and horizontally in this case with the right proportions, and this button is in the south. And the rest of it can be done using themes and styles. So the next steps we have to do is we start adding UI IDs, which are like CSS classes, to all of our components that need to be styled. And this will allow us to target those components from the theme editor or resource editor to specify things like the padding and the colors and background images and all the other things we need to do to style it. We also need to export assets from our Photoshop file into PNGs that we want to use. These are like images for the buttons. And in some cases, we need to export assets that we're going to turn into borders also. Okay, now we're into NetBeans. I've created a simple project that's using the Hello World template and the default business theme. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to call it Sign Up Form. And this is going to extend the form class. So this is the component that represents the structure. And I've gone over the structure in the previous section. So I've got a north container with a flow layout center. This is where I'm going to place the photo button. I've got a center container that contains all the fields, and this is using a box layout with y-axis. And I've got the Getting Started button being placed in the south part. Then I've set the Done button and the Back buttons to use the Commands API, which is the right way to use those top buttons, or it's my preference, because that allows Codename One some flexibility on different platforms to be able to connect those commands up to different things like soft keys. Okay, so if I run this as it is, it's not going to look anything like our design, except that the components are laid out in such a way that it matches conceptually how the layout is on the PSD. So I've got the photo on the top, I've got my fields in the middle, scrollable in case it's on a smaller device, and I've got my Getting Started button at the bottom. I found this design on the internet. It's a beautiful set of 6 screens that a designer has put together. These are based on iOS, but we're going to focus on this one screen here, screen number 6, this sign up form. And I'd like to convert this into a Codename One component. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what information we need from Photoshop. There's 2 things we need. We need to get a few images that we're going to be using for buttons, like this camera, arrows, this background image for the form. And the second thing we need is we need to be able to get some style information, like colors. Like, what color is this pink? What font are they using for the text? And possibly some widths and things like that. So we'll start out on the images. The first thing to do to get an image is to be able to find out what layer they're on. So if I have my Move tool selected here, I'm going to go after this camera for starters. So if I right click with the Move tool, it shows me all the layers in this entire document. Well, after a little bit of experimentation, I found that this layer number 6 and all of its sub things are the layer that I'm working on here. It's this screen here. So if I want to find this camera, let's start at layer 6, and it's probably this profile image section here, and indeed it is. If I hit the eye here to show or hide it, this shows and hides exactly what I need. So pay attention to this next step that I'm going to take, because this is one that you're going to repeat for every single image that you need to export. So I've got my group here, the profile image. I'm going to right click, then I'm going to go down to Duplicate Group. If it's only one layer, then you'll have a Duplicate Layer option. In this case, it's a folder with a few different icons in it. So we're going to go Duplicate Group to a new document and click OK. and that takes just what I selected, that image, and puts it in a new document. But this is a huge document. I just want the image, so I still need to go to Image, Trim, and I'm going to trim down to just the size of the image that I want. Now that I've got the image the correct size, I'm going to go File, Save As. So I'll save it in an Assets directory. So it'll be a PNG file, and I'm going to profile-photo button .png. Save, smallest compression, and we're good to go. We repeat that for every image that we need. The next one, the arrow. It's the same process. Find where the arrow is, probably in the navigation bar, and look at this, arrow back. Right click, duplicate layer, new document, OK, image, trim, file, save as, and this is, I'm going to call this back arrow.png. Make sure it's a type PNG. Smallest compression, done with that one. Now the right arrow. So let's get started button. We'll look around, arrow forward. There we have it. I'm going to duplicate the layer, new, image, trim, OK, file, save as, right underscore arrow. And a type PNG. One last thing to export. We're going to get this background image. This is a bit trickier, but after some experimentation I found that it was surrounding these, so there's the image, but it's also got a little bit of a purple background there. I'll hide that. So it's these two layers I need. So I'll hold down Shift to select them both, duplicate layers, new, OK, image, trim, OK, save as. Make sure it's a PNG, save, OK. Images, we can move on to the styles. So we need to find out, first of all, what color is this pink? What color is this text? What color are these border lines? What color is that link? And anything, oh, the font. We need to find out what font is being used for all of these labels. So Photoshop actually makes this pretty easy. So let's start on something easy. Let's get this button. So let's find back button, get started, and we've got the background here. We can go copy CSS and paste this into a text document, and this gives us the exact background color in RGB format. That's very useful to us. Okay. Now let's get the font. Did that have a font? No, the font would be part of this layer. We'll copy the CSS. And it's a font called Source Sans Pro. And luckily, this is a free font made by Adobe that you can get from Google Web Fonts. I downloaded this beforehand, so I can use that directly. And I believe it's using the same font for all of these. I'm sure of it. I checked earlier. So what else? We need the color of that text though, so let's go to that first name. Oh, phone number will do. That's the right color. Copy the CSS. And we've got this color, RGB 77, 96, 111, whatever that is, we can work with it. And we need to get the dividers now. Okay, so copy 3s, do PX dark. I'll copy CSS on this layer because this is the divider I want. And RGB 245, 245, 245. Is that all the information I need from Photoshop? I believe it is. We can now exit Photoshop and return to our development tools. Now it's time to style our form. So we style things by adding UI IDs to various components. For example, I'm going to set the UI ID of the sign-up form to sign up form. And this will allow me to set the background image inside the resource editor. Now let's go inside the resource editor now that I've got my sign-up form. We double click on the theme.res, which is inside the default package, and that should open up your resource editor. And under themes, we've got the main theme. It already has a whole bunch of styles because we're inheriting from the business theme. This is a preview of our theme right now. But let's implement this sign-up form UI ID that I just referenced inside my code. So I've got add, and I'll go sign up form. And this needs to derive from form so that I keep most of the attributes the same. So in the derive tab, I'm going to uncheck this override attribute and enter form. This causes this UI ID to inherit all the settings from the form UI ID, which is used for all forms by default. And right now this is what the background looks like. But our form, we want to use a background image. So I'm going to save this for now. But first I'm going to import all of my images. So I'm going to go up to Images and quick add multi-images. And this is where I'm going to select the images that I exported from Photoshop earlier. Okay, so in the file dialog, we'll find the files that I exported. They're in assets. I'm going to select them all. I can do that with holding down Shift and then select. Control or Shift will accomplish this. Go to Open, and it's going to ask for the source resolution. I happen to know that these images were created for an iPhone 4S, or the iPhone Retina display, which is a very high resolution. And I'll click OK. And it should have imported the images now. If I go into Main Images, it should have, there's my sign up form BG, and you can see it's generated multi-images, so it's resized the image automatically for each density of device we're going to face. So an iPhone will be a very high density, or the iPhone 4 will be, whereas the iPhone 3G will be this medium density. So this allows the image to look right on whatever density we run across. So going back into our sign up form UI ID, sign up form, here we go, double click on that, and I need to change the background. I'm going to do image tile both, and I'm going to select that background image, sign up form BG. And that's going to be used as the background for my form now. So if I save this and go run my project, because I've got the UI ID on my form, beautiful. So we have our background image. This stuff is actually going to get changed to different backgrounds eventually, but for starters, we do have our background image. We have these commands at the top that we're going to have to deal with to change also, but we'll do that later on. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to set the background image of the center and lower parts. So we've got our center container. Set. So I'll go center, set UID, center, sign up center. I'll just use that sign up so it's easy to find all of my styles. And I'll go back into the resource editor and go sign up center. And we're going to do a background that is color. And we need to uncheck this drive background. We want the background to be white. And the transparency, if we don't uncheck this, then it's still going to be see-through. We need it to be fully opaque, and that'll be 255 in this transparency field. This is very important, and it's an easy one to forget. So now, if we rerun our project, perfect. So we've got our background, we've got white, and these borders aren't exactly what we want in the text fields. We'll tackle that next, but we're moving in the right direction here. Let's tackle the text fields next. So each of the text fields we're going to assign a UI ID of sign up field. So we've got first name, last name, email, password, phone number. And I believe that's it. So let's go define our sign up field style. And the color of the text, we'll leave the background as it is. The color of the text we got in RGB. That was phone numbers. So 77, 96, 111. So I'm going to uncheck the drive foreground and click on the RGB tab here. What was it again? 77, 96, 111. Okay, and that gives us our text color. We also need to set the font, but we're going to do that after we've done this part. So the border, we are going to give it just a line border. And the color, we got that was 245, 245, 245, and we got that earlier from Photoshop. Thickness 1, and that should give us what we need. Text, alignment, padding. Let's give it a couple of millimeters of padding. And we need the margins to be 0 because we want them to be pushing right up against each other. So let's see how that looks. Oh, that's getting close. Now you can see there's a little bit of margin around here, and that comes from the padding from the parent component. So we need to change sign up center to have no padding. So let's go back in, sign up center, and we need to override the padding to be 0, and that should take care of that. Perfect. Now we do still have the issue of this label, but we will do that next. Actually, let's just set that label to be exactly the same. Code sign up field. So if we do that, okay, that looks pretty good. The next thing I'd like to do is take care of the fonts in these text fields. So we know which font we need. I went and downloaded it ahead of time. So I'm just going to copy it from the previous project I had. And I got Source Sans Pro Lite. And that's pretty close to what I saw Now I'm going to copy it into my project. Now that I have that font, I need to quit the resource editor and reopen it up so that it'll pick up my font. So I'll double click on that theme.res again. And we'll open up sign up field. And now we're going to go to the font tab. Make sure we're not deriving the parent font. And under true type, I should see my font right there. Perfect. So you can see the preview already updates with my font style. Now, one other thing that I need to note is that the text that we see when there's no text in a field is handled by the text hint. So if I want to see phone number, it's done with set hint. This uses its own label with its own UI ID and its own styling. So even though we've set the font on our text field with sign up field, we still need to set the font with the hint. So set or get hint label. This is a method of text field, and it allows us to access the component for the hint label, and then we can set the UI ID directly. And we'll just do sign up. What happens if we just use sign up field? And I'm going to apply it to all the fields. So let's give this a run. Beautiful. That's starting to look quite a bit like our the design that we're trying to replicate. Now let's work on the buttons. So we've got this photo button and the get started button. The photo button we're going to handle with, won't even really need much of a UI ID, well, except to get rid of the normal background. So we'll just give it a UI ID, photo button. Photo button. Okay, but we also want to set the icon, and we're going to load that directly from the resources file using the getImage method. And that should be sufficient. And for the bottom sign up button, I'm going to give it the sign up button UI ID. Sign up button. So yes, we'll use sign up button, and we're going to get the right arrow. Same way, get image. I believe that was the name of it. It's with an underscore. And let's open up the resource file. So we'll do the sign up button for the bottom button, the get started button. And we need a background color. Okay, and if we want it to be opaque, and the text should be white, and the alignment should be center, and the font will be our trusty Source Sans Pro, just like the other ones. And we'll save this and take a look at, oh, we should probably set the padding and margin also. So padding, we're going to do 2 millimeters around the board. I use millimeters instead of pixels so that it will adapt on different devices to be appropriate no matter what the density is. And I want 0 margin because I want this to be pushed right to the edge of the screen. Oops. Let's take a look at. Okay, it's getting closer, but obviously I made a mistake in importing the images. I have neither of the images listed here. Neither of them. So what did I do wrong here? And evidently I got the bottom one wrong too. Arrow underscore right. And that's going to make all the difference. And that's looking a little bit better. We'll want to make an adjustment. We don't need the word photo there, and we want to set the gap between get started and this arrow. So we'll set the gap. And we'll get the height of the font. And we'll use that as the gap so that it's relative to the size of the font. That's a nice trick I use because the system's got some density information that helps it to size the fonts. So I'm just going to tap into that, and I'm going to use the height of the font to help set my gap between the icon and the label. And with this, we're going to get rid of the photo. And we should almost be ready. But there was another thing I didn't like here. We're getting some padding there. Where's this padding coming from? Or this margin? So let's take a look at the center. And see if there's some extra margin or padding that I left in there. Sign up center. Margin. We got to override that and do zeros here. And that should push it out. And then we haven't done very much. So let's take a look at these top bars here. First of all, I've got this menu that slides out. This is because of a command behavior constant that's part of the theme that tells the commands to be rendered in the side menu rather than along the top. So if I go to the constants tab here, this is in the command behavior constant. Where is command behavior? Right now it's set to side. If I double click this, I'm going to set it to title. So that should bring the menu up top. And the other thing that you may be curious about, we need to change the font of this, and we're going to want to change the font of the command buttons when that comes up. The way you find out, because we didn't actually write this stuff, we got this essentially for free from the form class. So we may not know what components are in there, but if we go to the component inspector, it'll show us a tree view of all the components in the current form. And this is, we can see there's a title area container, and this has UI ID title area. So that's where the background color is likely coming from. And then the actual title is in a label with UI ID title. And indeed, if we go into our theme, these are defined, title area, title, and there's also a title command that we're going to want to override later. But in the title area, I'm going to make this transparent. So for the color, I'm not going to drive transparency, and it looks like that's going to do what we need. And for title, I need to set the font. It's Source Sans Pro. And that should get us what we need. So let's quit this, open up our app again, and we should be inching in on our destination. Beautiful. This is looking very much like the design that we picked up. So our sign up is looking right. Done and back still have the wrong font. It's very subtle, but the fonts are wrong there. So I'm going to look back in the components inspector. And so inside title area, we've got the title label, and we've got a container with box layout, and this is where our buttons are. So we've got one with a title command and one with a back command. The other thing is this back command we're going to replace with an image. So let's do that. Let's do that first. The back command will use back arrow.png. Okay, and in our resource editor, we need to override the title command, and we're going to give it the font that we want. And we're also going to give it a different color because the title command was supposed to be pink. So let's get that exact pink, and that was the back 247.50.103. Okay, perfect. And the back command. Well, we'll leave that for now. Now let's see if we've got the result that we're looking for now. Well, it's looking pretty close. We've got our back command. We've got our done button. Oh, we still need to remove that. We don't want that text. Our done button now looks like it has the proper font. And this is more or less our design. So let's take a look at the Photoshop design. There's our design in Photoshop. And there's our design in our app. We could put a little bit more padding in the top here, but other than that, I think we're in good shape. Oh yeah, well, let's just get rid of that back text. And one last thing, notice this. If I click here, it's losing things. These styles are getting screwed up when it's selected. This is because I've only defined, where's my resource editor? I've only defined unselected styles so far. Whereas what I need to do is I need to copy these styles to selected. So for buttons, there's a pressed style that will override the look when the button is pressed. So I need to copy this for my sign up button, and I'll paste it in pressed. Similar with my sign up field, I'm going to copy that and paste it in selected. And my title command, copy that, and I need to paste that into pressed. Yes. And let's do a victory lap here. Looks fabulous.